Chapter 3. The Keeper's Tale. Time seemed to slow as Evelyn took in the scene before her mind struggling to comprehend the impossibility of it all. The lantern room, usually a place of order and purpose, had become a battleground of spectral forces. Silas stood frozen, his face a mask of anguish and regret, while the ghostly forms of Charlotte and the malevolent grandmother engaged in their otherworldly struggle. "Silas," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind and the haunting siren song. "What's happening? Who are they?" The lighthouse keeper turned to her, his stormy eyes filled with a pain so deep it made Evelyn's heart ache. "It's time you knew the whole truth, Miss Blackwood," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of long-buried secrets. "But first, we must stop this madness." With a sudden burst of energy, Silas lunged toward the great lens, his hands reaching for the controls that directed its powerful beam. The grandmother's ghost shrieked, a sound that sent icy tendrils of fear coursing through Evelyn's veins. "You dare interfere?" the spectral woman howled, her form seeming to grow larger, more menacing. "You are nothing, Silas Hale. Nothing but a weak link in a long chain of keepers." Charlotte's ghost interposed herself between Silas and her murderous grandmother, her translucent form shimmering with determination. "Evelyn," she called, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "The locket. Use the locket." Evelyn's hand flew to her throat, where Silas's locket now hung. She had almost forgotten its presence, the weight of it against her skin becoming familiar in the short time since Silas had entrusted it to her. With trembling fingers, she grasped the small, silver oval and pried it open. A blinding light erupted from within, bathing the lantern room in a warm, golden glow. The grandmother's ghost recoiled, hissing in pain and anger. In that moment of distraction, Silas managed to correct the lens, sending its beam out to sea in a clear warning to the approaching ship. As the immediate danger passed, an eerie calm settled over the lantern room. The wind outside seemed to die down, and even the relentless crashing of the waves against Thorncliff's rocky shores grew muted. Evelyn found herself holding her breath, waiting for, she wasn't sure what. Silas slumped against the wall, his face etched with exhaustion. "It's over," he murmured, "for now." He looked up at Evelyn, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. "You deserve answers, Miss Blackwood. I only hope you can forgive me for keeping the truth from you for so long." Evelyn nodded, her mind still reeling from the events of the past hour. "Perhaps we should return to the cottage," she suggested gently. "It seems we have much to discuss." The walk back to the keeper's cottage was silent, heavy with unspoken questions and the lingering chill of their supernatural encounter. Once inside, Silas busied himself building up the fire in the hearth, while Evelyn prepared a pot of strong tea. It wasn't until they were both seated, steaming cups in hand, that Silas began his tale. "The history of Thorncliff Lighthouse is a dark one," he began, his voice low and somber. "It was built over a century ago, on land that the local folk said was cursed. Ships had been wrecking on these rocks for as long as anyone could remember, far too many for it to be mere chance or careless seamanship." Silas paused, taking a sip of his tea before continuing. "My great-grandfather was the first keeper, a stern man, by all accounts, dedicated to his duty of keeping the light burning and warning ships away from danger. But there was a secret eat at him, a terrible burden he carried." Evelyn leaned forward, captivated despite herself. "What was it?" she asked softly. "He discovered that the land truly was cursed," Silas replied, his eyes distant with the weight of family history. "Or rather, that there was a malevolent presence here, a spirit that delighted in luring ships to their doom. My great-grandfather thought he could contain it, control it even. He was wrong." The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls as Silas continued his grim tale. "The spirit, which took the form of a woman, began to influence my great-grandfather. She whispered to him of power, of riches that could be his if he would only cooperate. And slowly, bit by bit, she corrupted him." Evelyn shuddered, remembering the cruel, spectral face she had seen in the lantern room. "Your grandmother," she murmured. Silas nodded grimly. Yes, my grandfather was born here, raised in the shadow of the lighthouse and its dark secret. He, too, fell under the spirit's sway. And so it continued, generation after generation. The Hale family became the keepers of more than just the light. We became the guardians of a terrible secret, bound to this place by blood and duty. But you're different, Evelyn observed, studying Silas's careworn face. You fight against it. A sad smile tugged at the corners of Silas's mouth. I try to break free of it, he admitted. When I met Charlotte, I thought I had found my chance at happiness, at a normal life. We were married in the village, and I brought her here, thinking I could shield her from the darkness that plagued my family. His voice broke, and Evelyn found herself reaching out to place a comforting hand on his arm. Silas took a shuddering breath before continuing. At first, everything was perfect. Charlotte loved the wildness of this place, the isolation. She said it felt like we were the only two people in the world. But as the months passed, I began to notice changes in her. She became restless, claiming to hear voices calling to her from the lighthouse. Evelyn's mind flashed back to the journal entries she had read, Charlotte's increasingly desperate words now taking on a new, chilling significance. I didn't want to believe it, Silas said, his voice barely above a whisper. I told myself it was just the loneliness, the constant howl of the wind playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, I knew. The spirit had found a new target. He fell silent for a long moment, lost in painful memories. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. The night I lost her, there was a terrible storm. I woke to find Charlotte gone from our bed. I knew where she had gone, and I raced to the lighthouse, fighting against the wind and rain. Evelyn held her breath, dreading what she knew must come next. I found her at the top, standing by the great lens, Silas continued, his eyes haunted. Her nightgown was plastered to her skin, her eyes wild and unfocused. She babbled about the ghostly woman in the light, calling to the ships, luring them to their doom on Thorncliff's jagged shores. He paused, reaching up to touch the jagged scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. I tried to reason with her, to bring her back to herself, but the spirit had too strong a hold. There was a struggle, and Charlotte. She fell? Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. Oh, Silas, she breathed. I'm so sorry. Silas shook his head, as if trying to dispel the painful memories. The official record states that Charlotte slipped and fell during the storm. Her death was ruled an accident, but I knew the truth, and I've been fighting against the spirit ever since, trying to keep her contained, to prevent her from claiming more victims. But why did you bring me here? Evelyn asked, a note of accusation creeping into her voice. Knowing the danger, why risk another life? Silas met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desperate hope. Because I'm growing weaker, Miss Blackwood. The spirit's influence is getting stronger, and I fear I won't be able to hold out much longer. I needed help, someone with a strong will who might be able to resist her call. He reached out, taking Evelyn's hand in his own. I'm sorry for the deception, for not telling you the whole truth from the beginning. But now that you know, will you help me? Will you stand with me against this darkness? Evelyn sat in stunned silence, her mind whirling with all she had learned. The rational part of her screamed that this was madness, that she should flee this cursed place and never look back. But as she looked into Silas's pleading eyes, felt the warmth of his hand on hers, she knew she couldn't abandon him to face this evil alone. Yes, she said softly, squeezing his hand. I'll help you, Silas. Whatever it takes, we'll find a way to break this curse. As if in response to her words, a gust of wind rattled the windows, and in the distance, Evelyn thought she heard the faint, eerie notes of a siren's song. The battle for Thorncliff Lighthouse was far from over, and as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Evelyn steeled herself for whatever challenges lay ahead.